We are joined today by Dr. Marta Vicarelli, Assistant Professor of Economics at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where her research focuses on the risks and the socio-economic impacts of climate variability and climate change, the economics of nature-based solutions for disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation, climate resilience and green recovery strategies, and renewable energy policy. Today, she will present on a recently published comprehensive study she led, along with a team of more than 20 researchers from the University of Massachusetts system, including the lab's Paul Kirshen. The study provides valuable insight into various climate resilience approaches being undertaken by municipalities across Massachusetts. And I will hand it over to Marta now. Thanks for joining us, Marta.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to present at your lab. As you mentioned, I'm going to present the results of our survey-based study targeting Massachusetts municipalities, and it's a study that provides an overview, or if you want, a very broad outlook on climate resilience in coastal Massachusetts. I'm going to change. There is a little problem with the slides. 1 second. Okay, so this study was a collaboration of the campuses of the UMass University system, UMass Amherst, UMass Lowell, Boston, and Dartmouth. And the study has been recently published in Mass Benchmarks. At the end of the presentation, there are links to this article and to other resources connected to this study, and I'd be happy to share the slides if anybody's interested. As you said, this project was possible thanks to a very large collaboration, more than 20 scholars from the UMass system, and I wanted to highlight the participation of Paul Kirshen, who's here, I think, was affiliated also to the Stone Living Lab, and John Duff, who's also from the School for the Environment of UMass Boston. This project was an engagement activity associated with the Northeast Center for Coastal Resilience. It's a regional knowledge hub funded by the UMass Amherst School of Earth and Sustainability in collaboration with the UMass Boston, UMass Lowell, and UMass Dartmouth. And this center includes more than 60 scholars and more than 50 regional partners. The mission of the center is to produce actionable science, to inform policymakers, so data-driven, data-informed policy, and to support sustainable blue economy development by also facilitating regional collaborations. And we will discuss this a little bit more in terms of the needs for regional collaborations as we go through the survey results. This is just to give you an outlook of the different resources associated with the Northeast Center for Coastal Resilience. An important component of the work that we do is participatory science, so science guided by participation of different stakeholders in the region, including municipalities, but also tribal partners and numerous planning agencies. This study in particular, the survey study, was possible thanks to the huge support of the Massachusetts Municipal Association. They partner with us in the organizational focus groups during the survey design, and they also disseminated the survey to Massachusetts municipalities, to all Massachusetts municipalities. Among our partners during the survey dissemination, I would like also to mention all the planning agencies listed in this page. Again, without their support, we wouldn't have such a large data set. So the motivation for this study, probably everybody is very knowledgeable here, and you know that New England is experiencing a combination of climatic stressors, so rapid atmospheric warming, extreme precipitation and winter events are increasing in frequency, and there is an acceleration in sea level rise. All these phenomena combined are creating compounded climate impacts that have impacts on in New England from the point of view of the environment, socioeconomic consequences, and also infrastructural consequences that are also very strongly connected with the socioeconomic impacts. The problem we have, unfortunately, is that there is uncertainty about our ability, our society's level of preparedness and resilience planning to respond to these challenges. And so this study aims to try to answer some of these questions about how prepared are we, what do we need, what are the barriers that we are encountering in implementing resilience strategies. So in this study that is based on a survey of municipal officials, we try to provide a comprehensive outlook and a data baseline for climate resilience in Massachusetts. In this study, there is also an emphasis on the blue economy, and the perspective is the perspective of municipalities and regional planners. In terms of blue economy, we can think about the blue economy as defined in our study is an entity that incorporates environmental, societal, and economic wealth. So an inclusive and resilient coastal communities supported by thriving maritime or oceanic economic sectors that value and integrate biodiversity and ecosystem services for ocean and coastal health. Data collection. So we collected data on climate change hazards and impacts experienced by municipalities. So this is data related to the experiences, so it's self-reported by municipal officials, resilience strategies adopted to respond to these challenges, the barriers encountered in implementing the strategies, and the data needs of Massachusetts communities and planning agencies to support the implementation and the adaptive planning. The survey was distributed online via email by the Massachusetts Municipal Association to all its members in all 351 municipalities. And we received answers from 141 municipal officials in 111 municipalities. These municipal officials include mayors, town managers, select board members, and sustainability managers. It's important to underline that all Massachusetts counties and planning regions are represented in the sample, in the data set. This is a map showing the distribution of responses by county, and you see the 111 municipalities. And then we identified the coastal municipalities based on the Massachusetts Office of Coastal Zone Management. And in our sample, we have 36% of coastal municipalities. This table gives you at a glance the main demographic and socioeconomic characteristics of municipalities in our sample on the right and municipalities in Massachusetts on the left. Our sample is not a randomized sample. However, we think it's representative of Massachusetts, even though in our sample we have municipalities that are slightly wealthier than in average in Massachusetts and slightly bigger than municipalities on average in Massachusetts. And we have a slightly higher number of cities compared to towns, compared to the average in Massachusetts. This is expected actually because municipalities that are wealthier, cities, municipalities that are bigger are more likely to have higher staffing capacity and so more likely to respond to a survey. We do think, however, that even though there are these little differences between sample and Massachusetts population, we do think that the results are significant and informative in terms of resilience planning. And in a way, our results might actually underestimate the effects of climate change because the municipalities in our sample may be a little wealthier and therefore they may have more resources to plan for climate change. So the first question we asked was, how would you describe the impacts of climate change in your municipality? 99% of respondents indicated having already experienced impacts of climate change in their municipalities. And among these, more than 50% of coastal municipalities indicated experiencing significant to extreme impacts. Here you see in dark blue coastal municipalities, and in light, in teal, you see inland municipalities. And from this graph, you see that there is a sort of gradient where impacts are stronger in coastal areas compared to inland municipalities. As you know, our survey went to all municipalities in Massachusetts, and then we did the zoom in on coastal areas. In the following, in this slide, you can sort of see the gradient in a map, a sort of inland to coastal severity gradient, where extreme, you see dark blue means extreme, where extreme impacts are more likely to be reported in coastal areas. We asked what type of hazards are experienced in respondent municipalities, and the hazards that are most frequently reported having strong impacts. Here you see in dark blue strongly affected, lighter blue mildly affected, and then not affected in teal, and in yellow not affected, but we anticipate problems in the future. So the hazards that are more frequently reported having strong impacts are severe storms, storm surges, sea level rise, flooding, and higher high tides and king tides. And this is for coastal municipalities. We then, there is a little problem with my clicker. Okay, we then investigated a bit more the impacts that these hazards are having. And we examined both environmental impacts and infrastructural impacts, and then the implications of this type of impacts on the economics at large. Let's focus first on environmental impacts. The two most frequently reported strong environmental impacts are related to wastewater management and water habitat degradation. It emerges from the environmental impacts also certain concern in terms of public health, and we also collected data on expected future impacts, which points to, and you can see it also in the yellow bars here, which points to concerns in relation to water resource degradation up here. In terms of infrastructural impacts, for coastal municipalities, the most frequently reported include loss of beaches and properties due to shoreline retreat, damage to dams and or seawalls, damage to private properties, disconnected roads, and then you see also damage to ports and coastal transport infrastructure. So all these infrastructural impacts are strongly related to the fabric of the blue economy. And we will see that there are repercussions also at the economic level. Something that I would like to mention before changing slide is that among the least reported impacts, there are impacts that are expected to increase in the future. You see in yellow here, we have damage to water supply system, 44% municipalities are reporting this, and then concern in terms of damage to historic sites. So these impacts may affect the economy also in terms of tourism, again, in terms of public health. But in a way, this impact is a bit sad in a way, because it's also an impact on the historical heritage of the region. Economic impacts. I created a slide just to summarize a trend that we started observing both in the quantitative data and in the focus groups. There is a concern about migratory flows from coastal to inland municipalities. In coastal municipalities, we have identified among the most frequently reported strong economic impacts, additional costs related to disaster response, decreases in housing availability, and related increase in housing insecurity, and difficulty obtaining home and business insurance. Among coastal municipalities, more than 10% of respondents reported that their community is already strongly affected by an increase in housing insecurity and outmigration. And when we think about projecting concerns in the future, so we asked what are the concerns for the future, and more than 40% of respondents indicated that they expect these trends to worsen. In inland municipalities, the complement of this trend, 30% of respondents in inland municipalities anticipate future economic impacts from the in-migration of new residents. The following graphics show these main results that I highlighted in the slide. And you see here, among the most important economic impacts reported in coastal municipalities, additional costs related to disaster response, decrease in housing availability, difficulty obtaining home and building insurance. And you see here concern in the future about the decrease in property values associated with climate change risk. And also this increasing concern in outmigration of residents and housing insecurity. An observation related to our analysis, so looking through the data and also the qualitative data that we collected, it has emerged that when we compare the economic impacts in coastal communities and inland communities, there appears to be consequences in inland communities of the impacts on coastal communities. So this interconnectedness is associated, the mechanism is related to supply chain disruptions and impacts on labor markets. Essentially, negative effects on coastal infrastructure have reverberations in the blue economy at large, considering Massachusetts as part of a blue economy at a regional scale. So ramifications are experienced also in inland municipalities. I would like to focus now for a few slides on equity and social justice. Some populations are more likely to be vulnerable to climate hazards because of their characteristics, geography, for example, or pre-existing health conditions, or socioeconomic demographic factors. In our study, we asked municipal officials which among the following groups have been identified as vulnerable populations to climate change. The groups most frequently identified as vulnerable include elderly residents, people with disabilities, and low-income residents. So more than 70% of municipalities identify these groups as the most vulnerable groups. Fewer municipalities identified children, veteran, African-American, and other BIPOC residents, and immigrants as vulnerable groups. We then asked if municipalities invested resources in targeted programs, and the groups that were identified as most vulnerable are also the groups that are more likely to be targeted by municipal resilience programs. Here, dark blue means yes, lighter blue, no, but we plan to. This teal color corresponds to no, and then the very light teal color corresponds to not applicable in our municipality or region. And you see that elderly residents, low-income residents, and people with disability are among the groups that are more likely to receive dedicated resources, and less than 20% of municipalities reported dedicating resources to African-American and other BIPOC residents, veterans, and immigrants. This brought to our attention also the needs, the data needs to support adaptive planning in an inclusive and equitable way. So equitable resilience need reliable data to monitor progress and to monitor the impacts on vulnerable groups. The question is, do we have enough data? and we don't think we do have enough data. In this slide, we asked, is your municipality using any of the following types of local data in monitoring impacts of climate extremes? The dark blue answer corresponds to yes. The pink answer corresponds to yes, and the data is separated by race and ethnicity. And then in green here, you see no. And you see that less than 30% of municipalities currently have data or report having data on employment statistics, food security metrics, health statistics, and housing security statistics, and less than 7% of municipalities report having this data separated by race and ethnicity, which indicates that we might not be able to properly monitor the impacts of climate change on vulnerable groups. I will now transition to the strategies that are currently being adopted in Massachusetts municipalities to respond to climate vulnerability and climate change. We have 3 different types of strategies: planning strategies, engineering gray infrastructure strategies, and then green infrastructure, nature-based solution strategies. We start with the first one, planning strategies. So the first thing that there is a lot of information in these slides, and I'm giving you really like the key elements that I think might be most interesting for you to look at. But of course, these slides will be available to anybody, and there are also reports in an article if you want to dig deeper into some of these dimensions. Something that I wanted to point out in looking at this slide is that in blue you have, we adopted this strategy. So we asked which planning, climate resilience planning strategies has your municipality adopted. And in blue, you see municipalities that have already adopted. In pink, you have the answers corresponding to we would like to adopt this strategy. And in teal, there is the answer no interest. What is striking for me in this slide and in the following slides is that municipalities have either already implemented the strategy or they are looking to implement the strategy. There are very few cases where they are not interested in a strategy. And that was very interesting for us and confirmed our focus groups, in which essentially municipalities are extremely active in trying to cope and respond to climate change, thinking about all possible strategies that they can adopt. In some cases, they cannot adopt them, even though they are interested in them. And we will investigate a little bit the barriers after these slides on strategies. One thing that I wanted to point out from this slide is the fact that there is a strong need for adaptive management capacity, so continuously adapting responses to new change, but there is very limited ability to do so. And this is something that we will need, our team thinks that we will need to really think about for successful adaptation to climate change. The top strategies adopted include performing vulnerability risk assessment, conservation restrictions, collaboration with our municipalities and regional planning agencies. We will see, however, that this is also something that they would like, municipalities would like to strengthen even more. Sorry, I have to click 2 things in order to change slide for some reason. Okay, here we go. So this is strategies related to gray infrastructure. And you can see that more than 60% of municipalities have already adopted the tidal barriers, levees, seawalls, revetment, and other flood walls. And then wet flood proofing is also another strategy that is frequently adopted. Improvement or expansion of wastewater systems. So there is a strong active response to climate impacts. But what is striking for us here is that the percentages are in the range of 60%, 55%. When we go to nature-based solutions, which is the next one, the percentages increase even more. So this was very impressive for us because there is a very strong effort towards green infrastructure in Massachusetts, land conservation, nature-based solutions to mitigate and prevent erosion, nature-based solutions to prevent flooding, nature-based solutions to improve stormwater management. We are now going to look at the pink area, meaning what are the barriers that prevent implementations? What has stopped municipalities from adopting strategies that they would like to adopt? And these barriers are three kinds: resources, coordination and governance, and data and information. We're going to start from the first one, which is resources. The very striking result for us was that more than 85% of municipalities overall indicate lack of municipal staffing capacity to dedicate to climate-related issues as a strong constraint for resilience strategies implementation. This is followed by no centralized way to identify funding sources and lack of grant writing capacity. Lack of grant writing capacity is very strongly related to lack of staffing capacity. Lack of staffing capacity is more prominent in towns, but you can see that it's also present in cities. When we broke down this analysis even more by governance structure, and there are some municipalities, very small municipalities where the governance structure is a select board. They tend to have the strongest constraints in terms of ability to apply for grants, ability to implement strategies for their communities. We then look at coordination and governance strategies and barriers. And you see that the top barriers in terms of coordination and governance include insufficient resources to mobilize broad community support and difficulties changing regulations and bylaws. Something else that emerged very strongly in the focus groups is the need for more regional cooperation. The desire to work closely with other municipalities to develop regional strategies that could benefit multiple municipalities at once. And then more need for more unified and coordinated efforts within the municipalities themselves. These coordination efforts at the municipal level and regional level seem to be very important and something that municipalities are trying to achieve. But there are challenges, especially at the intra-municipal level. Sometimes there is fragmentation between divisions in the municipality and difficulties in planning for coastal resilience or climate resilience in general in a organic fashion. Lastly, we have data and information barriers. And these data and information barriers are strongly connected with the expertise. The most frequently reported barriers is lack of technical expertise to assess fiscal and economic impacts of actions and inactions. And there is, in relation to human capital and knowledge, there is also very frequently reported insufficient public education of local residents around climate change and its impacts. But important, and I would like to highlight them as well, are insufficient metrics and tools to monitor progress and lack of technical expertise in natural resource management implementation. These are just summary of the key barriers that I already described, so I'm gonna move forward towards the information and data needs. From the previous slides, you've seen that there is a concern about lack of expertise to assess the economic impacts. And when we asked municipalities, what type of data does your municipality need that is not currently easily accessible, the most frequently reported response is economic evaluations of climate change impacts. There is need of this information at the very local level for municipalities to make decisions, take action, and finance projects. And this has been reported by almost 89% of municipalities. We are now towards the end of the presentation, so looking forward, it seems that municipalities are really aspiring to an inclusive, participatory, adaptive planning, but this requires some inputs. In particular, there is a strong need for data-informed decision-making, and data-informed decision-making that can adjust itself over time, so continuous monitoring as well. The concern when we think about climate change impacts is that our decisions today will have long-term consequences. And so also decision-making about financing and about resilience strategies can have long-term consequences. There is a strong need for this data-informed decision-making in light of the large amount of funds that is currently being mobilized for climate resilience. The 1 trillion Infrastructure Investment and Job Acts includes a significant component targeting climate resilience, and there are emerging state resources targeting resilience infrastructure and green economic development, even climate-ready labor markets. Essentially, we really need large amount of data, but also continuously collected data to readjust the adaptive path and avoid lock-in and path dependency that could lead to maladaptation. So in terms of inclusive, participatory, adaptive planning, one important need that we can see emerging from these results is data needs. And the last slide identifies the other important need that emerges from the results, which is collaboration needs. There is need for multi-institutional, regional collaborations between different entities, academic, private entities, governmental entities, and local stakeholders. In this study, we provide a general outlook on coastal resilience. It represents a baseline for long-term participatory and interdisciplinary research. The results represented were obtained from data collected in 2021. Since then, we have collected 2 more rounds of data that we are in the process of analyzing in 2023, and we are currently collecting more data in 2024. And I'm hopeful that we will be able to show you also trends in maybe future presentation. The goal is strong impact monitoring, strengthening our adaptive planning possibilities. And this was the end of my presentation, but I have a few more elements that I wanted to share with you. So at the end of the slides, if the slides are shared with you, you will see links to the article where we summarized all these results. This is the original report that contains also all the results for inland municipalities. A link also to a Boston Globe article that discusses these studies. And then I just wanted to mention a few elements from my ongoing research in case anybody's interested to reach out and discuss about those, and they're connected to this study. We started developing a habitat restoration project in underserved communities, in the communities around Romney Marsh, Revere, Lynn, Everett, Malden, and Sogos. We have applied for a $3 million NOAA grant, but while we are waiting for the grant, we have already started working with the municipalities in strengthening their coastal resilience capabilities, and I'm happy to share with you what we are doing with them if you're interested. And then the other project that I wanted to mention is a project a European Union project in partnership with the London School of Economics, Cambridge University, University of Venice, and Stockholm University, where we are investigating the potential to integrate nature-based solutions and the insurance sector. And as part of this very large European project, we are analyzing and designing new risk management instruments that integrate nature-based solutions and insurance. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that with a team of universities, including UMass Amherst, but also the United Nations University and the United Nations Environment Program, we have just completed a study assessing the economic benefits of nature-based solutions, and the paper has been submitted, but I'm happy to share information with whoever in the audience would like to follow up after this talk. So thank you so much for your attention, and I'm done with the presentation.
Thank you so much, Marta. That was fantastic. I want to open it up to questions, and if folks could raise their hands, be sure to call on you. I see Chris with your hand up. So Chris, have at it.
Thanks, Joe. Professor Vicarelli, great presentation. Thank you so much for being here. One of the slides, the municipalities identified insufficient education of local population on the climate impacts as like one of the main barriers. And did the folks who, I'm not sure how to ask the question, did they say why that was a barrier to like their ability to do it, and did it correlate to like the survey question about the data that they would need to collect to improve their ability to respond? Does that make sense? I'm curious, like what the solution to that, what type of public education has, maybe it goes the other way, maybe it's the folks who said that's not an issue for them. What are they doing right that they're communicating to their populations?
I think we also so municipalities may have different levels of education. The responses in municipalities where they indicated that the public didn't have enough information, or their level of education was a barrier, based on focus groups, our impression was that lack of information about the impacts of climate change could lead to pushback when there were calls for resilience strategy implementation at the municipal levels.
Oh, okay.
In some cases, municipalities, and this is in relation to the focus groups, for example, municipalities indicated that they prefer not to use climate change in advocating for certain strategies, but to speak about coastal resilience in general, because the expression climate change was controversial and would create pushback. So it's possible that there is also a form of polarization in the public opinion that leads to different types of responses. What, however, was very interesting for us was to see how many municipalities, and I think we have a graphic in the slides. I can point it later if you want. I can reach via email and show you, where they highlighted the interest in developing education programs at the municipal level as a form of strategy. And many municipalities actually, in terms of their planning strategies, included education programs for residents, outreach programs. And I'm now working with I mentioned at the end of the presentation, I'm now working with the municipality in the North Shore, Revere, Lynn, Saugus, Everett, Malden, and so the Saugus River Watershed Council. We have a team of students from the School of Public Policy right now engaged with this group of municipalities in supporting them for coastal resilience enhancement. And one of the tasks is outreach programs, education programs for local communities. Another thing that has emerged, and just to complete my answer, another thing that has emerged in my discussions with several municipalities, the fact that sometimes residents push back on resilience strategies or resilience initiatives because they are concerned about the amount of money that is going to go in those initiatives. And often residents don't realize that the funds may come from the state through the MVP program, but they may push back because they're afraid that it's going to be these strategies are going to increase their taxes. And so one of the education programs or outreach programs that these municipalities have is to explain how these strategies are funded, so that there is no public pushback, basically.
Thank you very much. That was very enlightening. I would be interested in talking to you more about your work on the North Shore. We share some overlap there in some conversations we Save the Harbor and the Metropolitan Beaches Commission are having with some of those exact communities. And I would love to get it. Maybe we can talk offline.
Thank you. Yes, with pleasure.
That's great. Thank you, Chris. Great question. And glad to see connections happening there. Not seeing any other hands. I'll jump in with one right now. And just say thank you again, Marta, for being here, and thank you to everybody to all attendees for being here. Such a wonderful survey and study. Great to see that you were able to get insights from so many municipalities. And I'm happy to see the work continuing as well. It was also encouraging the amount of municipalities that were interested in pursuing nature-based approaches, and the barriers that you highlighted to doing so just speak to the exact reason we have the Stone Living Lab and the reason we're doing the work we're doing. So that was just all very insightful and encouraging. My question is, throughout the survey and study process, what were some of the findings that you found most surprising and really that you weren't expecting, and that might have changed since the last time this survey was done?
So I can, from the data that we are currently collecting, I can say that the trends are still the same, and the level of concern has actually increased in terms of vulnerability. Municipalities are very concerned, and in answer to the second part of your question, what was most surprising, I was very impressed by the level of engagement and planning that municipalities are investing, and in a way saddened by the fact that lack of resources prevent them from really developing everything they would like to develop. So I was really impressed by how prepared, knowledgeable, and hardworking municipal officials in Massachusetts are. I was really, really impressed. And it feels, and I'm on the other side, I'm sorry for them, because in some cases I feel like they're really struggling to cope with a very complex problem. And there is some need for streamlining and guidance that can streamline solutions so they don't have to spend so much time planning, but they can implement. So in this light, this idea behind the NCCR, so the knowledge hub where municipalities can share their knowledge, can share their blueprints, and these blueprints can be used by others, that could be very helpful. Right now, I'm also developing, I didn't mention it in the presentation, but I'm also working on a project with the universities in Scotland, Germany, and Costa Rica. And we're looking at green recovery strategies post-COVID and impacts on the blue economy. And so how the blue economy is developing post-COVID in these different areas of the world. And in the US, I'm very impressed because the municipalities are receiving less financial support from the government, less guidelines from the government, but they're incredibly invested. So this entrepreneurship spirit and these efforts are really commendable. And I'm hoping that by creating a platform for knowledge sharing, these efforts would be catalyzed and become faster and less resource intensive for municipalities.
That's amazing, and we would love to, as the Stone Living Lab, work with you to figure out how we could help in doing so and potentially collaborate on that. So, yeah, that's great. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Marta. Good presentation. This may have been covered, but do you have any sense of the optimism of coastal communities to deal with the threats of coastal climate change?
That's a big question. It would be nice to include this question in the next survey, but in terms of optimism, there is a lot of concern, really, and fear of being late in planning. I do not have, I cannot provide an indicator for optimism, but there is a very strong concern of being late. And I think you and I have been working a lot on many different things, and we are seeing now also with the communities in the North Shore around Romney Marsh, that they're very concerned that they are late and they need to work really fast, because there are delays in terms of planning and administrative times, no? So there are these administrative times that dictate the waiting times to plan, to have some planning approved, some implementation steps approved, and this delays things up to 5 years. So planning can take 2 years, but before that, we also need to get approval from the local stakeholders. That's actually, these are the concerns that municipal officials are sharing with us. And then if you put things together, we are already in 2030. And how are we gonna respond if we are still trying to work towards things that are gonna be tangible in 2030? So are we fast enough, essentially? So I think that, I don't know if I would be able to say something about optimism, but there is a sense of anxiety that we are late and we have to speed up and we don't know how to do it.
And thank you very much. It's good to feel some pressure from the communities as opposed to none. So that's good. The second thing, was there any concern about impacts of nature-based solutions on gentrification and inequity, about adaptation in the coastal zone from these communities? Was that on their radar screen at all? I don't think we asked that question, but maybe a sense.
So your question is whether the adoption of nature-based solutions could generate inequity.
Yeah, and in general, they're concerned about inequity issues, about adaptation in the coastal zone.
Actually, so from the focus groups, it was the trend was almost the opposite, because the creation of nature-based solutions could offer recreational areas for communities so from groups in social justice communities. This has been brought up in several focus groups to need to restore the marsh or restore the area along the river to create new green spaces for the community as well. So when you think about nature-based solutions, there are many different types of benefits, right? I'm expanding a little bit this analysis for everybody in the audience. There are different types of benefits. There are benefits related to ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, so the nature-based solution can prevent or mitigate disaster risk. There is ecosystem-based climate adaptation, so progressive adaptation to climate change. But then there are all the other co-benefits, including increasing recreational opportunities, carbon capture and sequestration. I think what was my perception from the conversations was that the recreational benefits was captured by the respondents more than concerns related to gentrification, essentially because there is little exposure of social justice community to quality natural landscapes. And this would be an opportunity to give this access.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. Thank you, Paul. Chris, did you have another question?
I did. I wouldn't have guessed as many towns were trying managed retreat as it looked like there. And I was curious if there was a way to get more information. Is that in the article? Like which municipalities are trying that and what types of things are they trying?
Sorry, what was the
managed retreat?
Ah, yes.
As a strategy?
So you've seen, let me pull out the slide. Sorry, Acrobat here. The managed retreat slide, not many municipalities are doing it, but many would like to think about it. Planned retreat. So 11% are adopting this strategy and 58% would like to adopt this strategy. what emerged from the focus group is that this is one of those strategies that has the most pushback from local populations. And in some cases, municipal officials don't even dare to bring it up because they're afraid of repercussions or conflicts, essentially.
That 11% though seemed like that was more than I would if I were to guess
Yeah.
how many folks were trying.
I
That's
can
like
try to
10.
look.
That's like
I-
10 municipalities. Like, what are they? I'm just really curious what they're doing and how they're pulling it off.
I
If they're pulling it off.
I'm sorry that I don't have exactly.
Yeah. No, that's
but,
fine. That's fine.
in several municipalities during focus groups where they were indicating the fact that they lost properties or they lost roads. And so then that conversation has to happen in terms of what if the erosion keeps proceeding fast. And in these slides, I didn't include quotes from respondents, but one of the most heartwarming things for me in this survey was that respondents, besides providing answers to the quantitative questions, they provided very large qualitative answers that were optional, sharing their thoughts and their emotions. And there were some really memorable quotes. And one quote, somebody said, right now, our property values are great. Everything seems to be working well in our community. But in fact, we know that it's sufficient once big storm and we're going to lose a couple of properties from the coast. And this were it was a community on the Cape. So when these major events happen and there is a major erosion impact in the community, then this type of conversation is about planned retreat start happening.
And Chris, I would also refer you to our colleague Kristen Uterwick's study from Urban Harbors Institute, that shared some insights and depth on that as well.
Yeah, we'll go back to that. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Marta, just on your insights on municipalities feeling like, they've got good planning in place, but the securing the funding and implementation just takes so long. I mean, I was living that, as the senior resilience planner for the city for a while. I remember hitting submit on our grant application to FEMA for the Resilient 4-Point Channel Infrastructure Project in January 2019. We're in January 2024 right now, and that very good shovel-ready project is still under review by the federal government 5 years later. And so it's advancing, which is great. It's continually advancing, but that is for a city like Boston with lots of resources and lots of ability to be able to push those things and coordinate, and multiple planners and grant writers and all those things. The other municipalities that you talked about don't always have that, right? Lynn, a city of 100,000 people, has a fantastic planning staff, but it's 2 or 3 people, right? So your challenges are heard loud and clear. Really appreciate it. I see a question from Phil in the chat. Phil, do you want to ask that, or do you want me to read it off for you?
To read it, John. It's okay. I did it already.
Sure thing. So Phil asked, are you hearing municipal fears of out-migration, which then leads to lower property values and higher taxes? Are there concerns of increasingly higher insurance?
Yes, we do. And I can share the slide. Sorry, I'm going back and forth in the slides, but yes, there is this concern, and there is concern both in the focus group and in the quantitative data. Here, in relation to what you were asking about housing, so decrease property values due to climate change risk. And this is connected to concern about reduced fiscal revenues in the communities. And in relation to insurance, difficulty obtaining home and building insurance, meaning it's becoming too expensive. Decrease in housing availability. So this was across the board, something that really came up during focus groups, and then we saw it also in the quantitative data. I would like to point out something about this. We are reanalyzing data from more recent data in relation to these questions, because we wanted to try to understand whether there were also trends related to COVID, because this data was collected in 2021, and it was a time where there was migration towards out of cities, essentially. And we wanted to understand if there was a mixed message in terms of immigration and out-migration of different types of groups. We do know that in Cape Cod, for example, there was a strong in-migration of people who used to live in cities before, but the underlying trend seems to be out-migration from coastal regions for those who used to be the traditional residents because of increase in insurance cost, sometimes increase in housing prices, but at the same time, decrease in properties that are accessible because of climate risk. So there are mixed forces at play, and we want to reanalyze this data more recently to see if we can capture the results without the impacts of the COVID migration.
All right, well, with that, I'll say thank you again to everybody for joining. Thank you, Marta, for presenting. This is a wonderful seminar. Really appreciate it and look forward to seeing everyone next month. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and feel
you.
free to reach out if you have any questions about this study.